Hi everyone, good to see you again all. I hope you all will be fine. Please check Iraq latest news updates. On Tuesday, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Al-Sudani led the 34th regular session of the Council of Ministers, tackling a range of pressing issues and unveiling significant decisions aimed at fostering administrative reform, supporting crucial sectors, and bolstering economic stability. The session commenced with a comprehensive overview of the nation's current state, addressing paramount concerns on the agenda. A series of pivotal decisions were ratified, reflecting the government's commitment to effective governance. Education sector and student support. To fortify the education sector, the Council resolved to grant an exemption to external students over the age of 28 from the mandatory waiting period stipulated in Article 9 of the Amended Examinations Regulation No. 18 of 1987. Agricultural advancements and food security. Most of the session was devoted to deliberating the agricultural plan, focusing on strategies to elevate domestic crop production and sustain the nation's food security. Among the initiatives greenlit by the Council, the redirection of fertilizer subsidies from the Ministry of Agriculture to support the modern irrigation techniques project stands out. Furthermore, exempting specific fertilizers from hazardous materials import regulations will facilitate agricultural progress. Disability care enhancement. The Council extended its support to individuals with disabilities in care centers by transferring Dar al-Hanan home oversight for the severely handicapped and other centers from the governorates to the Department of Care for People with Special Needs. Economic outlook and reforms. Addressing economic stability, Prime Minister Al-Sudani directed the implementation of recommendations outlined in the Diwani Order Committee 23512 of 2023. These directives aim to facilitate allocating new appointments for high-achieving students and individuals with advanced academic degrees within ministries, harmonizing these appointments with existing legal frameworks. Strategic sectors facilitation. In the pursuit of optimal governance, the Council of Ministers mandated that all ministries and government entities ensure the timely and accurate entry of employee data into the State Employees Pension Funds Program, contributing to a robust employee registration and retirement contributions collection system. And the Iraqi Minister of Finance, Taif Sami, confirmed on Tuesday that the Treasury Single Account (TSA) system will contribute to fighting corruption. Sami's remarks took place during a meeting she chaired to review the progress made in the TSA system and the subsequent positive impact on the financial and banking systems, the state news agency INA reported. The meeting was attended by members of the TSA committee, directors of government banks, representatives of the Central Bank of Iraq (CBI), and the Federal Board of Supreme Audit (FBSA). The finance minister explained that the TSA system is part of the government's efforts to accelerate financial and banking reforms and anti-corruption measures aimed at preserving public money. The TSA system is a financial policy used in several countries all over the world. The system was proposed by the federal government of Nigeria in 2012 to unify all inflows from all government agencies into a single account at the Central Bank of Nigeria. And the Washington Institute for Strategic Studies published an analysis of the situation in Iraq and the crises it is going through at the internal and external levels, and the failure of successive federal governments to rule recently and temporarily, describing Iraq as more like a country under international tutelage. At the same time, he did not rule out the return of the country under the 7th clause. The analysis stated that the declining political and legal reality in Iraq today indicates that the country is still facing a deep strategic dilemma as a result of the international obligations and restrictions imposed on it. According to the analysis of the American Institute, decades after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1990, Iraq is still practically under the influence of dozens of UN resolutions and sanctions as a result of the aggression launched by Saddam Hussein against Kuwait. Despite Iraq's official removal from Chapter 7 sanctions of the United Nations Charter in June 2013, and his commitment to pay final dues that exceeded $50 billion in compensation to Kuwait in February 2022. However, there are some issues that are still outstanding between the two countries, while Iraq struggles to obtain the description of a normal country and integration into the international community. The analysis also stated that, in fact, returning Iraq from describing a state that resorts to violence to describing a normal state requires complex policies and procedures that take a long time. Moreover, the problem of Iraq's faltering in integrating with the international community is due to the ongoing internal crises. Since 2003, successive governments have plunged the country into complex internal crises of conflicts, terrorism, corruption, chaos, and political polarization. Instead of returning Iraq to normal, these governments have turned into caretaker governments, and each of them issues crises to the next government. He pointed out that Iraq has become in a situation similar to a state under international tutelage. Even today, the state is no longer able to fulfill its obligations under the Strategic Framework Agreement concluded with the United States, its main ally. Despite the tireless efforts made by the Iraqi government under the Prime Minister Mohammed Al-Sudani, however, Iraqi officials must realize that there is no real development for Iraq without ensuring its full commitment to the consequences of the decisions of Chapters 7 and VI of the United Nations Charter related to Kuwait and other issues. The analysis touched on a summary of the obstacles that Iraq still faces and the possible steps it can take to maintain its reputation as a stable and responsible country at the international level. Avoid the violations set forth in Chapter 7. The analysis said that although Iraq was officially removed from Chapter 7 sanctions in 2022, it still faces the risk of violating many United Nations resolutions, which in turn could lead to the reactivation of Chapter 7. In particular, Iraq needs to heed paragraph 32 of UN Resolution 628, which requires Iraq to inform the Council of its commitment that it will not commit or support any act of international terrorism or allow any organization to commit such acts within its territory. The American Institute pointed out that Iraq has always been willing to host a number of dangerous militias supported by Iran, including groups that the United States has included on the terrorist list such as Asarib al-Haq and Qatarib Hezbollah. And with the Shiite coordination framework now in power, the roles of the militias have escalated. These organizations are classified by the United States on terrorist lists to unprecedented levels. He added, in fact, the Iraqi Minister of Higher Education, Naeem al-Aboudi, is a member of Asarib al-Haq, and the head of the Prime Minister's press office, Rabbi Nader, has long been associated with both Asarib al-Haq and Qatarib Hezbollah. The association of these officials with groups classified on terrorist lists will constitute a source of embarrassment for Iraq and impede its return as a normal country. The analysis also emphasized that Iraq should work systematically to dismantle armed groups that have taken root within its borders, ensuring that they cannot threaten national or regional security. In the long term, this initiative will be implemented alongside Iraq's efforts and commitment to support democratic mechanisms in the political process, and the transfer of power peacefully without resorting to violence, which has become familiar during the past few decades in Iraq. The analysis considered that Iraq's success in controlling the status of those militias and combating those groups classified on terrorist lists would help it gain the confidence of the international community and would distance it from possible violations of Chapter 7. This may also lead to the termination of the work of the United Nations Assistance Mission for Iraq (UNAMI). Iraq's fulfillment of its obligations under Chapter 6. The analysis issued by the Washington Institute dealt with the issue of Iraq's commitment to Chapter 6, and said, there is a need to resolve Iraq's disputes with Kuwait peacefully in 3 files, which are the file of the missing Kuwaitis, the file of the missing Kuwaiti archive, and the file of border disputes. With regard to the file of the missing, a joint committee could be formed between the 2 countries under the auspices of the United Nations to discuss and resolve this file, in addition to making more efforts to determine the fate of the missing Kuwaitis since 1990. And he warned that the 2 parties must also coordinate efforts to recover the Kuwaiti archive, which was kept in the Iraqi intelligence headquarters, which was bombed and looted in 2003. The thorny file, which is the file of demarcating the maritime borders, remains beyond the point of reference 162, so Iraq and Kuwait can refer to the UN Committee and its documents, which drew the borders between Iraq and Iran in 1993, or resorting to an international technical committee to demarcate the water borders between the 2 parties, or the 2 parties may resort to the International Court of Justice, if all these efforts fail. Improving relations with the United States through the Strategic Framework Agreement. The analysis pointed out that Iraq can also gain more international credibility through its commitment to the Strategic Framework Agreement with the United States, which could ensure that Iraq remains a strategic ally of the United States in any regional conflict. Moreover, reforming and stabilizing the Iraqi national security apparatus in line with the objectives of the Strategic Framework Agreement will contribute to the development of the country's infrastructure in cooperation and coordination with U.S. agencies and international organizations. The analysis stressed that there is a need to restructure the Iraqi national security system to liberate Iraq from international restrictions of a defensive and security nature, especially with regard to 4 basic files: regional and international defense and intelligence cooperation, combating terrorism and corruption, and achieving security and stability in Iraq through a commitment to support the democratic political process and the merging of armed entities with sovereign ministries. There is also a need to activate the National Security Council to supervise all these files and support transparency and confidence in the banking and financial sector, which is a sticking point in relations between Iraq and the United States. In addition, Al-Sudani's avoidance of dealing with China or other countries, in a manner that violates Iraq's obligations under the terms of this agreement, would contribute to building trust between Al-Sudani and the United States. The internal situation in Iraq and the possibility of success for the Sudanese. The analysis highlighted the internal situation in Iraq, and stressed that the Sudanese government must also work to restore voter confidence in the political process by preventing the use of coercion and force in the electoral process, and the involvement of the international community to supervise the integrity of the elections is a good way to build citizens' confidence in the electoral process and gaining international recognition and trust. Finally, dealing with internal issues related to the displaced and the rights of minorities and women will contribute greatly to building Iraq's reputation as a reliable and stable country. The analysis considered these steps as the road map for the return of Iraq as a normal country for the international community. If the Sudanese succeeds in implementing it by dealing with it as one package of indivisible measures and policies, then it will make Iraq a quantum leap in its contemporary history, and will accelerate. However, Iraq's failure to implement these commitments and steps will open the door to chaos, conflicts and division. Thanks. Take care.